my God, don't laugh at it.
Sorry. Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry. Yes. Yeah, I'm fine.
Alrighty, thank you all so much for coming along. I really can't even get over how big this crowd is. It was not what I was expecting, so thank you all so much for coming. My name is Maddie Harrington, and I'm the Deputy Director here in Queensland for Out for Australia. So we're incredibly proud to run this event today in conjunction with Paws Chambers Leicester. Thank you guys for all your support through this. So before we kick off this evening's event, I would just like to ask Haraki Duncan to come here and please give the acknowledgement of country.
Hi everyone, I'm so grateful to be invited to speak here. I do want to start off by acknowledging the traditional owners on the land in which we meet, the Yagara and Turrbal people. I would also like to acknowledge the elders past, present and emerging. I would also like to acknowledge any Indigenous people with us as well. Thank you.
Hi everyone, welcome and thank you again so much for coming as well. I think I echo Maddie's thoughts when we didn't realise this would be so popular, so it's awesome, it's really great. My name's Tegan Lewis, I'm the co-chair of Pride at Cause here in Brisbane. I think this topic is a really important one that hasn't received enough airtime, so I'm really excited to hear from our amazing panellists tonight and hear about their journey. In terms of Cause as an organisation, I think we're sort of on a journey of sorts as well. In 2017, we introduced our transitioning policy, which I think was a really important step. And we're hoping to continue to learn and to continue to keep making changes so that we support our transgender and gender diverse staff. In terms of legal work in this space, because obviously that's our topic tonight, Cause has done a little bit of work in this space. So in 2018, the Western Australian Law Reform Commission actually engaged Cause to work on Project 108. Project 108 was a review of the legislation in Western Australia around recognition of the person's sex, change of sex and intersex status. And so we drafted the final report, which was released in December last year, and that recommended really widespread legislative reform that was similar to what has been happening in Victoria, the ACT and South Australia. In 2019, we did some more work, or this year, we've done some more work for the Law Reform Commission in Western Australia around the Equal Opportunity Act. So they're reviewing that at the moment, particularly the religious exceptions, which you would all know is a topic of much debate. So that work is obviously still ongoing. And then finally, we've also done some work with Transgender Victoria around their supporting materials, the training that they deliver and developing that for them. So that's work we're really proud of, I suppose. So anyway, that's probably enough from me. We're really excited to be able to host this for Out for Australia tonight. We're really honoured to do that. And I'm really looking forward to sort of hearing everyone's experiences and insights. So thank you very much. Oh, and also bathrooms, if you haven't found them yet, are out towards the lifts and past the lift, so out the door left, all the way to the left, and they're gender neutral, so please use the bathroom which you feel most comfortable. That's all from me, and I'm over to Maddie. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Tegan. Really appreciate it. So I guess obviously everyone is already aware of what tonight is about. What we're wanting to do is highlight the experiences of trans and gender diverse people and their experiences with the law. So the way that I conceptualized this when I was coming up with it was that the law is all-encompassing. It's everything that we do in society. It's everything that we, everything is simple from changing your name as a trans person to getting a new driver's license or birth certificates, etc., etc., etc. It's such a convoluted area that is so complex, and so many people are up to fumbling their way through it. So tonight I have my two amazing panelists here who I couldn't be happier to have share their experiences. They're two absolutely incredible human beings. So I'll quickly introduce them both to you. So first we have Taraki Duncan. So Taraki is a proud Aboriginal sister girl. She is from the Western Baraja in southern Bajura and Maori tribes. Okay, sorry. And she's passionate about the intersectionality between LGBTIQASB+ and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities, and hopes to work within the Brisbane community for better inclusivity for LGBTIQ+ individuals and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities. So if everyone can give Taraki a warm welcome. And we also have Johnny Valkyrie. Hi. Johnny is an openly queer person who describes themselves as being transgender and homosexual. They are an advocate, educator, and community organiser within the community services space, and is also a professional as an administrative assistant at Norton Rose.
Yes, hello Norton Rose people.
Thank you, Norton Rose, for coming. Thank you, everyone, for coming again. So you're based, obviously, here in Brisbane. You're originally from Sydney. You work full-time in the CBD, but outside of that, your passions lie in, obviously, the LGBTI, particularly trans activism space. You've recently been involved in a number of rallies I've seen, such as helping trans people feel safe at Reclaim the Night, for instance, and also a number of other events throughout the course of this year. So everybody welcome Johnny to the panel. And then we have the Loggy. I'm not really part of the panel per se, I'm more the moderator, but I will be adding in my 2 cents worth every now and again. A bit about me, I'm an openly trans woman. I am one of the few openly trans lawyers here in Queensland and even in Australia. And I currently work as a legal counsel at QLD University. So I'm well aware of the laws surrounding being trans, and I'm passionate about helping trans people navigate them. So thank you all for coming again, and I'll take my place and we'll get started.
Didn't know we'll bring it out.
Red or white?
I'm Cherokee.
Look, nothing wrong with a bit of alcohol. Makes the panel go smoother. So, thank you, Taraki, for doing the acknowledgement of country. So I guess I'll start off with getting you both to introduce yourselves to the panel, a bit about yourselves, your transitioning experience, and basically just explain what you feel comfortable with. Taraki.
Okay, awesome. I'll go first. Thank you. I'm Cherokee. I like white wine. Yes, so like Maddie said, I identify as a sister girl, which means I am an Aboriginal transgender woman. My family tribes are Kamilaroi down in New South Wales, and my mum's tribe is Bidjara. I've been living in Brisbane for about 4 years. Sounds like a long time, but I still feel really new. I came from regional Toowoomba, so a very backwards town. But can you believe they produce this?
Okay, now for the Toowoomba hate here, please. This is a safe space.
Professionally, I work at the University of Queensland. I'm heavily involved in our ally network there. Outside of work, I'm also on the Gabunjalum committee, which is a social network for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander LGBTIQ sister and brother boy peoples. And we do different events throughout the community. We do advocacy, all of that good stuff. And yeah, that's pretty much me.
Brilliant. Okay, Johnny.
Okay, you want that?
I have a small voice. So let me put it, please. Hello, everyone. I am Johnny Belcrew. I am from Sydney, and I lived for almost 10 years in the Darling Downs region. Toowoomba. Yes, I understand your pain. So I've lived here in Brisbane for about a year now. Prior to that, I was travelling to and from regional Queensland into Brisbane for my own sanity, and I do mean that quite seriously. Regional and rural areas, especially in conservative Queensland, are extremely difficult for LGBTI and queer people, particularly if you are transgender, and especially if you are early on in your transition if you choose to do so. I have a background, about 5 years in community service and education. I've mentored young LGBTI people, both with Mission Australia and Headspace, and privately. I used to work in a high school, that was fun, and no, it really was, terrible sarcasm. No, I really enjoyed it, I do enjoy that. I have a background in community arts as well, and I have been an activist since I was in high school. I have led here in Brisbane a number of protests against the Religious Freedoms Bill, which is not meaningful for religious people or LGBTI people for that matter, and is a cause of severe controversy across Australia. Some statistics found from Just Equal, an advocacy body here in Australia, have found that more people are feeling worse than they were during the marriage equality debate over this issue. And yet this issue is not being publicised. So that's the main focus of my advocacy and lobbying at this point. But I also do some work with Open Doors Youth Service, and I've been nominated for the Many Genders, One Voice Transgender Community Awards. So it's a little summary for me.
Well, I mean, look, I can't really comment about the Toowoomba thing. I can't lay on the hate there. I grew up in conservative, though, Christchurch in New Zealand. I fled after the earthquakes. That was enough for me. Moved to Wellington, get hit with another earthquake. I'm like, no, this is not working for me, so I decided to come somewhere where it floods. Why? I clearly like natural disasters. Okay, so I guess what I want to touch on now is a bit about the distinction between binary versus non-binary genders. So I guess, me personally, I identify as a binary trans woman, and my experiences as such are obviously going to be very different to someone that, for instance, is non-binary or genderqueer or anything else that you may choose to term yourself, basically, where you identify as something outside of, I guess, the societal norm. So what I want to do today is just throw over to both Tariki and Johnny, who both sit on opposing sides of that spectrum per se. Tariki identifies as also binary trans woman of Aboriginal background, and Johnny is a non-binary trans masculine person. So Tariki, if you could give us a bit of an understanding of what being binary trans means to you.
It means I can wear heels every day.
Yes.
Wow, okay.
I know, sorry.
I guess for me, it means that, I'm living the life that I feel on the inside. I mean, for me personally, I have people in my life who are still maybe getting their heads around how it works when it comes to gender and sex. So if I, have met a guy or something, you know, I might have a friend say to me, oh, does that mean they're gay? And having the conversation of how it works, I mean, I should honestly be sending a quote for like training. But yeah, so for me, it means pretty much living the female life that I have always wanted to do and think I do well. It means that, you know, I can go out into the world and feel more confident than I was ever before I had transitioned, and finding a new side to myself that I never could see because I was never exposed to it. And with that becomes a whole lot more self-appreciation and love, because I finally accepted myself as well. Yeah.
No, that's perfect. That is absolutely perfect. And look, I mean, I can relate to that 100%. Like that self-confidence, that self-love, even. You know, for me personally, I recently wore a bikini for the first time in public, and just that euphoria that comes from that is just something that, you know, was never really there pre-transition. I think you know, for me it was something that I never really felt comfortable as prior. You know, I hated swimming. I didn't feel comfortable, whereas this time I'm like, actually, this feels right. And getting to live my life on my terms is the best thing, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Don't turn the mic off.
And just adding on to that, I definitely feel like there is not enough awareness or education in, you know, the differences of sex and gender.
Absolutely.
I mean, I will completely acknowledge my privilege that, you know, I have passing privilege, sorry, and that, you know, I can go out in public and I'm not cloaked. But in a way, it's also a struggle for me too, because on the outside people see this, you know, woman, and then when I'm explaining it, it becomes really confusing.
It's really
and
difficult.
it becomes really like mysterious almost. That's in my perspective anyways.
I mean, look, I feel the same way. You know, talking to people and trying to explain it to them, it's not the easiest thing to do.
No.
And it is quite emotionally exhausting as well at times, depending on the circumstances. But look, you know, thank you for explaining that to everyone. I'm sure we all appreciate it. I'll now throw over to Johnny to give us an opposing perspective, shall we say.
Am I in the opposition, am I?
Well, I'm talking about so.
All right, well, being non-binary or queer, as I like to put it, means that I wear heels sometimes. No, not really. I think it's important to acknowledge that we have a system here in the Western world that is unique to every other culture, and it is assigning identity on the basis of genitalia. So when you throw a gender reveal party, you're saying to the world, my child has a vagina, or my child has a penis. And if your child has anything outside of those norms, you kind of brush it under the carpet. And by that I mean they get surgery. The intersex people are everywhere. They are born with genitalia that is neither a penis or a vagina, and they are assigned a male or female role. So when we are all born, we all get a label, right? Everybody here gets boy or girl put on them based on what kind of body that they appear to have when the doctor looks at them. And I like to think of it as a game of Russian roulette. I lost the game. So when I was born, they gave me the label of female, given the way that my body looked when I was born. And that conflates my physicality with my identity as a person. And that is really hard. And I don't expect people here to understand how that works, if you are not transgender. So I am a non-binary transgender person, and non-binary identities exist in every culture all over the world. I studied anthropology. You're going to get a boring humanities lecture. We will get into that later. But essentially, let's over drinks, yes. Call me later. So non-binary identities, when we say non-binary, mean it's not part of the male-female binary designed by Western imperialists, right? So in indigenous communities and in places like India, in places like Europe, there are recognized identities that are neither male nor female. These are, for example, in Samoa, the Whakawhine, in India, the Hijra and the Kina, and these are sort of a third gender, if you like, to sort of frame that for you. So there are sets of identities about how people move through the world that have absolutely nothing to do with the physicality of that person. Though some people may wish to adjust parts of their body to make themselves feel more comfortable. Just like if you didn't quite like having brown hair, you go and get yourself some frosted tips or something. Except, you know, it wouldn't make you experience.
We moved out in the 2000s or what?
Yeah, we did, but like, you can colour your hair, you can have a fresh new look, but I have to deal with wearing essentially a corset in Brisbane heat. And that's how I do it, and that's painful. So next time you complain about hair dye on your fingers, think of me.
Thank you, Johnny. As always, incredibly insightful. I did see some interesting statistics recently about intersex people with intersex variations. The stats were that people with intersex variations, whether you know it or not, are about as common as people with ginger hair. So that's a huge portion of the population that are actually born intersex, and that society has said, doctors have said, no, you have to either fit into the male or female category. We won't let you be you. You have to fit within that normal role. And I think Johnny will touch on this shortly. Obviously, you've just alluded to, some intersectionality there between being your non-binary self and also intersex, but I'll leave that up to you to explain shortly. But my next question is for you both. How do you feel about the way that gender is defined in mainstream society, or even in legal constructs that you've seen throughout your transition? A lot of organisations now are offering people to change their names, be it via a preferred name, or change their gender to male, female, or X. How do you guys feel about that? Like, how has that affected you through your transition, and how have you found it, I guess? Johnny?
Okay. So, all right. So there are a few questions in there. I will say, I will give you some context about gender roles in the West, and that isn't that's just a neutral statement. There's nothing wrong with the way that we conceive gender here in Australia and other Commonwealth countries per se. But I want you to think about the world wars. I want you to think about the fact that when men went to war, women were running the country. And when the men returned from the war, they realized that, there's not so much different about us after all. And then you see in the 1950s a lot of marketing coming out that draws an extremely strict line between male and female, what men and women are supposed to do, supposed to look like, and how they're supposed to perform. And this permeates into countries that have undergone colonization, countries that are trying to advance in their technology, and developing countries. And so what you see is lots of subliminal messaging in fashion, in advertisements, in television, in radio, and all sorts of media, imposing an image on the public, what is male and what is female, erasing all others. The fact is, sex, or as I like to call it, your physicality, or what genitalia you have, is not binary. Intersex people exist. And so if you want to take the binary male and female argument, that is fundamentally and scientifically incorrect. And so why then do we categorize genders into two categories? That doesn't make sense to me. In terms of law, I was born in New South Wales, and in New South Wales, in order to have my birth certificate read the marker that I would like, and I'm thinking about, do I want X or do I want male? Because I navigate society as male. It's harder to say, I'm non-binary. Too many questions.
Is that quite a dilemma for you?
That is such a dilemma. Okay, does everyone know who John Van Ness is from Queer Eye? I'm that one. Yeah. That one, except I was, assigned a different gender at birth. but a lot shorter and a lot less hairy. John Van Ness recently came out as non-binary. Has very visible facial hair, long hair, very fruity and fashionable, lovely, chirpy person. And so that's a very openly famous non-binary person. But I bet every day they get called he. Oh, hello, sir. And it's just that there is no.
He actually uses he in pronouns.
Oh, this is true. Yeah, he does use he in pronouns, but I feel as a non-binary or queer person that it's sometimes easier to navigate as male, in my case or John Van Ness' case, in societies that don't have a space for you. And there are some legal options to have your gender marker as X, which they say is indeterminate. It can really form an umbrella for people who do not fit the male or the female categories. The problem here is not all countries recognise it, so you could have some major problems at customs. I don't want nobody strip searching me. Thank you. Buy me a drink first. That's not happening. That can be, all jokes aside, that can be incredibly traumatic for people to have to undergo. So navigating within the systems of male and female is sometimes safer for queer people, people with a gender diverse identity.
Amazing, thank you. Taraki.
You have to repeat the question.
Sure. I know, Johnny took it off on a wild tangent. No. Basically, the question was, what was the question? It's been a long day, guys. Come on. Cut me some slack. How do you feel about the way that gender is defined in mainstream society or the legal sector particularly? What have your experiences been with that? Obviously, you and I are both binary. We're both relatively cis-passing, so we have differences in that regard to, say, Johnny, who identifies as someone that is non-binary. So how's it been for you?
Something that has also been even more lucky for me in my transition is that Cherokee is the name that I was born with. I did not choose that name, trust me. I didn't have to go through that whole process of getting IDs changed over.
It's a pain.
Yeah, exactly. And I couldn't imagine having to go through it. I mean, I've had to go through other processes, to get confirmation of who I am. And it can definitely be stressful. So having, the legal pressure on top of that, I couldn't imagine. When it comes to X markers, I obviously can't comment too much because I'm not really in that category. But I have used the markers in the work that I have done. And I think that having more options is definitely better. I completely understand that sometimes it doesn't have capacity to range, all these different checkboxes. I think something that people can take away from today in your organisations is leaving blank spaces for people to fill that in, where they can free text how they identify. And even if you don't have the capacity to put that into your surveys or into your profiles, definitely having the X, because it's at least acknowledging that there are more people out there than just male and female.
Perfect, thank you. So, I'm going to throw it back to you now, because you kind of already touched on it in some ways, but I want to find out a bit more, and if you're happy to talk about it, that would be amazing, about how Indigenous cultures here in Australia recognise trans people and gender diverse people within their societies, because obviously, the Western society that we live in is very black and white in the way that it treats trans people. What's it like in the Indigenous culture? How does it compare? How does it contrast, I guess, to what we have?
I'll first preface by saying I can only really speak on my perspective and that of people that I've been around, because as everyone knows, there's hundreds of different tribes out there, so I couldn't possibly speak on behalf of everyone. And that is also one of the things that makes it tough to answer, because each group have their own cultural protocols and their own laws that they practice. in my experience, and that of others that I have been around as well, it's kind of tough. But speaking on the Indigenous side of it, we don't go through life with the titles and all of that kind of stuff. So I recently spoke at the last Out for Australia event, and we spoke about terms of reference for Aboriginal people, where people do go through their lives with titles and boxes, where our way of life is completely different. It's culture based. So it's about the service that we're doing in the community. It's the the protocols that we're practicing. It's the love and care that we're putting around our families. It's supporting our families. So I guess in a way there is less pressure for gender diverse people in the communities, because it is based a lot of kinships. So that means, we have gone through all of this traumatic past through the power of kinship, meaning that those who are with us, our family, our tribes, our mob, they're the utmost importance to us. Sorry, I'm going to take a little break. In saying that, it can also add added pressure within the communities who maybe aren't so accepting. And I think when it comes to those situations, there's definitely a lack of education and awareness, especially in the rural and remote communities for sister girl and brother boys. So in many cases, the communities and the families just don't really know what it is. They can't comprehend it. And so that's kind of where sister girl and brother boy actually derived. It's from, the sister girls and brother boys who, felt this particular way. They felt like a woman trapped in a man's body, and they didn't know how to express it right. And so that's where sister girl has come from. In saying that, it can be quite difficult when, our elders and our families aren't as accepting. And that adds a whole layer of, barriers and mental health issues for gender diverse people in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities. I mean, we already know the stats on mental health, suicide and self-harm rates, domestic violence within LGBTI communities, and Indigenous communities on their own are just as bad. And putting them together, there's not enough data out there to support it, but you could just assume the barriers and the difficulties, in particular the brother boy and sister girls in rural and remote communities are facing, because I acknowledge my privilege that I'm in a space where I can access HRT, I can talk to counsellors, I can go to see psychologists, I have EAP, I have so much support around me and information at my fingertips. And so I think going back into that community, it would be really difficult. And another thing that is a little bit difficult in the communities is because that they might not have access to HRT and services, or legal services as well. So people still keep their, male masculine names. They're not changing their birth certificates. A lot of the change is in their physical appearances. And so it's hard for the community and the elders to accept, the sister girl who was before them, when all they've known is the man that they've known. In saying that, though, when you do get through the process, it's really empowering, because then you get to start living, your true authentic self within your kinship system, which is paramount, which is the most important. So it's really empowering. I did have another train there, but I just lost it. So I'm going to leave it there.
Look, if it comes back,
Yeah.
let me know. We can throw back to you at some point. That's
I hope
really
that
cool.
all makes sense.
I mean,
Yes.
that makes sense to me, Johnny. Yeah, cool.
I
Well, we're in agreement.
forget that not everyone's black, so I'm like, oh, jeez, do you know what that is?
I mean, look,
Okay, good.
what you said was incredible. It's something that I've never really had the knowledge of, and I don't know whether that's because I come from New Zealand, where obviously the system is very different in some ways in terms of recognition of multi-trans people and things like that. It's a different societal structure within their tribes as opposed to what it would be over here within the communities, particularly those that are, rural and remote, as you said. That would be incredibly difficult, and I guess it's not something that I'd ever really thought too much about, because it's not something that we see front and centre when we're talking about these issues.
Yeah, so Sister Girl and Brother Boys are amongst the most marginalised groups within Australia. So it does add another layer of complexity on top of it, because, front and foremost, we are Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander, so we're dealing with the barriers that has on us. So, institutional racism, judgment, stereotyping, and I think sometimes, unfortunately, when you have a layer of issues, it's getting bumped down and down and down to, discussions and awareness that people know of, because we're dealing with bigger things, with racism and politics and all of that kind of stuff. And because it is such a small group, very underrepresented, disempowered even, there isn't that driving force that, other diverse groups have, where they can march in the armies, maybe can march in the parades together, which is so great that, here in Brisbane, the First Nations people, we lead the march, and that's really acknowledging that within our LGBTI communities, which is already so diverse, we're still an Aboriginal land, and that, that is all of our history.
Awesome. Is there much of a brother boy and sister girl culture within Brisbane?
Yes, there is. As you could imagine, metropolitan areas is where people tend to flock. And, metropolitan areas are actually that with a high number of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander residents. So it is definitely a hub for people to come to and be themselves. But with that said, we have mob everywhere. So it's not like running away, because you're running into more mob anyways.
You can't escape it.
But there's definitely more room to be who you are, more awareness and more education.
That's amazing. Thank you. Okay, so Johnny, you're a non-binary, masculine presenting person. How do you find that, and how do you navigate society? Is that what does that mean to you? How do you feel? How do you feel when you're talking to people and trying to explain that to them? I think when we first met, I read you as male, and wasn't really thinking anything else. And then obviously when you started explaining to me that you were non-binary, and that you use they, them pronouns in queer spaces, and then he, him in public spaces, for someone that, such as myself, who only came out in January this year, this whole year has been an incredible learning curve for me. But obviously, you've been transitioning per se for how long now? 5, 4?
Almost 5 years.
Almost 5 years. So, can you tell us a bit about that and your experiences and that sort of thing? Because obviously, we've just heard from Taraki about what it's like navigating society as an Indigenous sister girl. What's it like for you?
Thank you. I think that is a really important question, and something that often causes confusion when I interact with people, even in queer spaces. And I want to touch on what Taraki was saying about intersectionality. So Taraki is a woman, Taraki is a transgender woman, Taraki is an Indigenous person, and these... Yeah, the glass ceiling, it's like multi-layered. And that's what it... Multifaceted, alright, I like that. We choose our words. And so these states of being are awarded less privilege, less notoriety, and less access than other people. And it's the reason that you see more men in positions of power. You know, there are these cultural and differences and barriers that everyone faces. For me, I sometimes, it's a bit of a funny ha-ha, but not really. Thank goodness I am white and thank goodness I am able-bodied, because without that I would not be where I am today. I can tell you that much. I can also tell you that 3 in 4 transgender people in Australia between the ages of 12 and 25 have experienced homelessness or are currently experiencing homelessness. That is 75%. I have not, for the simple reason that my parents accepted me for who I was. And on kinship, we know even from research, like if you want to go down that route, that kinship is the most important factor in the well-being of marginalised people. When you are excluded from society, you cannot access society. That causes health problems, mental health problems, physical health problems, all sorts of issues. So kinship, that is a core element of Indigenous culture, as you were talking to us on. But I feel that purely from a values standpoint, kinship should be the focus. We are all human beings. We do not need to be cruel to each other. That is important. So with that said, I'll explain some of the difficulties that I face with my intersectionalities.
And what could the law do to either change or help you?
Yes, well, for starters, the New South Wales government could stop telling me to take out my uterus in order to in order to change the identification markers on my documents. Why should they say what happens to my body? Why should I have to reject a part of myself that I'm absolutely okay with? Why should I have to forfeit my right to carry my own child as a parent should I wish to? Why should my identity have anything to do with my physicality? It does not, clearly. So how the law can change is by engaging with people who have the lived experience to assist you with policy reform. Because we know our stories, we know who we are, we know what we need, we are our best advocates. And when you engage with us, and you hear our stories, the law should follow in reforming that policy. You don't have to do anything to yourself. You know? If you want to go out and you want to get a makeover, as I like to call it, you know, you want to, some people, like I took testosterone, I've been taking it for about 4 years now, it's made my voice change, my face change, not overly, you know, you can still tell the photos of me as a child are mean, because I'm still mean, just look a little bit different.
That's the truth of the matter.
That is the truth of the matter.
Are still what they were before. We're just happier, more confident beings.
Exactly. That's a really important point. Any changes that we go through are about,
For us.
they are for us, and they are for revealing ourselves to the world as we would like to be seen, not as how others have made us out to be. And so the law can really help in assisting marginalised people who know their stories, who know what they need to reform policies and law around to benefit those communities. It is really that simple. I mean, I'm not a lawyer. I don't know how any of that reform stuff works. But I do know, in principle, I do know how it should work. And so when I go and try and get a proof of age card that looks like me, that has my name on it, and I'm denied by the Justice of the Peace in regional Queensland, oh no, I can't sign that, he says. I can't sign that. I said, I have a list here of all the documents that I need to provide to you for your signage, and then to send them off to the BDM. And he said, oh no, I can't do that. I said, why? I need to change my name. I've provided a clear police record. I'm clearly not trying to thieve someone's identity, or I would have run out the door 5 minutes ago. You know, the police station's right next door. And I told my friend about this. She was living in Brisbane at the time, and she said, oh, come down, I'm taking you to the courthouse and we are going to get you some photo ID. Like, okay, so I got a haircut and I got my best clothes and I went down and we spent the day running around, getting all sorts of documents, went to the courthouse, explained it. Justice of the Peace here said, what? Oh dear, I'm going to have to contact their office. That is a very real case of discrimination. I explained. I provided everything. I was not in any way out of line. And it's not just about the photo ID. I really want to share that. It's not just about having a little card that says I'm over 18 and I can go to the beach tonight and have a drink and dance. It's not about that. Without a photo ID, I can't apply for a passport, so I can't travel. I can't apply for a bank or a bank account or a credit card because you need a certain amount of ID. I can't sign up for a uni. I can't go and apply to change my Medicare details. I can't access society without an ID that looks like me and has my name. That is the reality for most people like ourselves, is that we have to fight tooth and nail simply to be recognised within the legal constraints of our societies. That is ridiculous. I pay taxes, okay? Hey, come on. Yeah. Yeah. Aren't we all? Every single person. So, you know, that really needs to change. I should be able to go, righto, Fred, my name is Johnny now, and I need a hot new profile photo. Give it to me. And that's all it should be, you know?
Can I jump in on that?
Go for it.
Thanks for sharing your story. I think I had something very similar happen to me, actually. And I think in those situations, you know, we're intelligent people, we know who we are, and we come prepared. But I think the fundamental is that, you know, these people who are perpetrating, you know, discrimination, they minimize us. It's like we don't matter and we don't care. Like they don't care. Like you said, it's not about the ID or the entry, which I'll go on to explain. But it's that they are in a position of power and they are telling us what we can and can't do. Yeah, no, you're not the Prime Minister, Zal. You know,
Even the Prime Minister.
Yeah.
Really, let's be real here.
That's what I mean. It's the people that it's the gatekeepers. It's the people in power that is in everyday life that is, you know, doing the most harm to people, because they are the people that we have to run into every day, every weekend, and you know, it's kind of one of those deaths by 1,000 cuts. You know, every time that there's a gatekeeper who, you know, is discriminating, that's on top of all the other gatekeepers as well. Do you get what I mean? And it's clear, it's not about, you know, the photos or the whatever you need. It's that minimizing who we are. And like you said, at the end of the day, we're all humans, and unfortunately, we live in a society that doesn't acknowledge, that isn't a thing for some people. Hopefully we're all on that page. Unless you're an alien.
Fair. Well, it's funny you both touch on that because, I mean, obviously as a trans person myself, I've experienced all of those things. But the one place that I didn't expect to experience it from until I had to go through it was until recently. So about a month ago, I was, after 6 years of study, finally admitted as a lawyer. And what that meant is, you know, this isn't America. You don't have to set the bar much to everyone's confusion. I'm constantly having to explain that to people. Everyone's all hung up on suits, and it's like, okay, right, weird, but cool. I'm no law student, I promise. But basically what I guess took me the most off guard was that when I went to get admitted, there's this whole process that takes forever, and the lawyers in the room will, you know exactly what I'm talking about here. And there's one part that particularly is very, very, very problematic for trans people, in that you have to publicly advertise your intention to be admitted as a lawyer. So it goes in the Supreme Court registry in a little book that anybody can flip through. It's an A4 piece of paper that you print out, you print 2 copies, give one to the registrar at the court, and then put one in this A4 manila folder. Anybody has access to this. That alone, yeah, not too much of a problem. The problematic thing is, this form requires you to out yourself to every single person that could potentially come across it, because it's intended for cis women who have been married and have a maiden name, because it asks you to declare any other names which you've been known by, which, you know, to 90% of people in the room won't matter. You know, I know my mother would, you know, happily put down her maiden name if it came to it. But for me, that would mean that I would have to put my birth name down on the public record. And me personally, I'm okay with my birth name, but I don't want that out there for any Joe Blogs to see, particularly in the age that we live in today, where there is so much hate and transphobia circulating, not just online, but in public. And that this being in a public space where anybody can access it, just really didn't sit right to me. Like, the last thing I wanted was someone from the Courier Mail, for instance, just having to, you know, have a good old flick through, see if there's any goss coming up in the upcoming lawyers that they can take the mick out of. And for me, I figured that this would be a problem. So I raised it with the Law Society, and it took me 4 months of back and forth emails with the Law Society to reach a conclusion, to go, actually, you know what? I'm not a criminal. My birth name is irrelevant. I'm Maddie. That's that. Don't make me out myself to people that I don't even know. In essence, I would be outing myself to the entire legal profession in one fell swoop. And I know that's contradictory, given that I am so open about who I am. But for me, being the first trans person to go through the admissions process here in Queensland, I wanted to make a statement. I wanted to set the record straight for those that come after me. Someone, say for instance, like Georgie Stone, or any other trans kid who has been transitioning their entire life, has only ever been known as Sarah. But because of an anomaly at birth, was called Mike. Why should that be a thing? And so for me, that was when I was most like, are you for real? Like, this is the 21st century. Why do we even have to firstly publicly advertise our intent? But fine, like, that's not my decision to make. But the fact that I had to out myself, I was not comfortable with. Anyway, at the end of the day, I finally got what I wanted. I was able to advertise in my name and my name alone. It was a huge weight off my shoulders, but I shouldn't have had to go through that in the first place. It shouldn't have taken 4 months for me to go back and forth to seek a resolution on this. It should have been a very simple matter of, okay, fine, provide us with police certificates just so that we can verify that you're not a fraud. I don't necessarily agree with that in the first place, but hey, you know, we've got to work within the system sometimes. If that's what they want and it gets me admitted, then so be it. And I guess another point that I just wanted to contrast about, you know, Johnny talking about surgeries and things like that. Obviously, I come from New Zealand. New Zealand has a very different system in place when it comes to changing things like birth certificates. You're not actually required to undergo surgery in New Zealand to change your birth certificate. It's a very legal process in New Zealand. You have to go to family court and make a presentation to family court judge. But that's going to cost you $1,000 max versus $30,000 for a trans woman or over $100,000 for a trans man to undergo surgery. It's not perfect by any means, but I think that's the right step. It's a step in the right direction, and it's a step that Australia should be considering. The problem with Australia, obviously, is that all the states and territories are independent of one another when it comes to this. They're not in lockstep. I would like to see some federal ruling on this, but I don't think that will happen anytime soon, unfortunately, here. I don't think Australian society is at that point where it is willing to fully commit to allowing trans people to be themselves. I think there will always be that element of gatekeeping. And I mean, that was going to be the next question that I touched on. So you guys have already conclusively covered that for me, which has been amazing. So I guess my next point that I wanted to ask was, I know that we have quite a few allies in the room tonight. How do we go about, you know, getting these allies on board, and, you know, what advice can you give them towards supporting us?
Before I start on the allies, I did want to just quickly touch on something that you said as well. I think it doesn't matter what context it is. I think that we get to decide who knows, our past and our history. It's up for us to decide, who knows that information. Like you said, I'm also very open and public in the community about my identity, but there are also certain situations where the people in the room don't need to know that.
Exactly.
And in some cases, for my safety, I wouldn't want them to know. So I think regardless of whether you're active and putting yourself out there as a trans woman, we still get to decide when we disclose that and who to. Yeah. Oh, sorry, the allies as well.
No, absolutely. You've got the floor.
Thank you. I think for allies, it's really important to be supportive without being overbearing. Now, let me explain that. It's important to be, understanding and empathetic of, gender diverse people. But from my perspective, I've had people come on too hot, or they've come in. Oh wow. And they're coming in with this immense support, which is really nice, but it almost goes back to that dehumanizing, as if I'm broken or I'm less than, I'm unequal, and I do need support with my barriers, but overall, I'm not a broken person, or I'm not, something out of this world. So having that good balance of support is really important, and acknowledging that, the issues and barriers that, people who are gender diverse go through are completely different to people who are heterosexual. Oh gosh. Oh gosh. Yeah, it really has. So for example, I might be, having a bitch with my girlfriends as we do, kiki kaka. And I'll be explaining, certain situations that have gotten me down or barriers that I'm facing. And I almost feel like it isn't as valued, or it isn't as important, and I think it's just on the basis because they can't relate. They know it's important to me, but what I'm seeking from them isn't what I'm getting because they can't relate. So having a really good understanding of the issues and barriers that people go to, and I guess that has a level of emotional intelligence. So being intelligent to other people's emotions as well. Visibility is major. So obviously you as allies can help bring us up. We can give them lots of photos and do lots of rainbow stuff, pride, this and that. So we all know visibility is great. But for me personally, like I was explaining earlier, kinship's really important. So whether you can make those connections that are on a personal level and they're meaningful, all of the good stuff like visibility will come after that, because that fundamental connection has already been made.
Yeah, that is really important. It is first and foremostly important to see us as holistic beings. Everybody in this room has things about them that, including me, I have some sort of electromagnetic aura. I promise I am human. All right, let's hope that, well, apparently the Prime Minister thinks that's debatable, but anyway. We'll dig there. So, yes, Cherokee, we are people. And I want to say to people here tonight who are not transgender or gender diverse, that coming to events like this, if you are able to, is really important, because what that tells me as a transgender person is that you care, and that you want to understand, and that you know that you don't have all the answers, but you're willing to listen, and that you might be confused and uncomfortable and feel weird because when you were a kid, your mum and dad said, oh, that's what girls do and that's what boys do, and all of a sudden you've got 3 of us up here saying, hey, guess what, all that's a lie. You know, and oh, really? Different cultures recognise third genders and more? That's really interesting. So right now you're putting yourself in an uncomfortable position, in an interesting position that maybe you haven't had to confront before. I know all of you have seen media about transgender and gender diverse people. I know all of you have heard comments made by members of government about people like myself, Maddie and Taraki. And I know there are people in this room who are transgender and gender diverse, whether they are out or not. And we are a reality. We are not up for political debate. This is not a political issue. This is an issue of humanism. We are people. We know who we are, first and foremostly, and what we need from you is humanity. And that is not something we are awarded often. So the fact that everybody here tonight is here to listen, to understand, and to take into account the diversity of our experiences and the wholeness of ourselves is really a testament to how far we are coming, especially in corporate spaces, which have traditionally excluded people like us, excluded or not been safe for people like us, even people with who are not transgender. The word for that is cisgender. Even for cisgender people who are homosexual or bisexual or asexual or pansexual or just fruity beings like myself, you know, even for people who do not have transgender status, who are diverse in their sexual orientation, find that navigating spaces that are not made for them is very difficult. And much of the conversations we've had around pride and acceptance have been around sexuality, have not so much been around gender. The only conversations about gender have been about women, which is important, that trans women are included in women, you know, and other trans and diverse people are included in marginalised gender identities. We need to acknowledge that. I believe, according to the D&I head at Northernmost Fulbright Australia, I am the only out transgender person that they know of in Australia, and perhaps this side of the hemisphere, I'm not sure. So that's huge, and I feel very seen. I feel like it is my responsibility to speak out, and I feel that it is your responsibility as allies to let me take the microphone and speak for myself, because I know my story and I know you support me, but we need meaningful and diverse representation of people. And I need you to see me and to hear me. And when I say I am transgender, when I say I am diverse, when I say I am a homosexual man, I need you to believe that. I don't do this for fun. You know, I didn't wake Nobody wakes up and says, I want to be marginalised by society.
I just want to throw my life completely out the window. And
Yeah, I want to experience the highest levels of suicide in this country. I want to experience continual rejection from people I'm trying to date because, oh, I don't like what's going on there. All right. Come back to me once you've done a bit of reading on identity. You know, nobody asks for this. It is not a bad thing, it's not a pity party, but we have been given a hard deck of cards to navigate society, and any marginalised person will understand what it is like to have this minority stress, to have these growing statistics. So I want you to be kind to yourselves and kind to others.
Wow. I don't think I can help that. Look, one thing that I do just want to say from, I guess, a workplace perspective is, for those of you who are allies here, you know, trans and gay people particularly are the butt strong-willed trans people up here. But not everyone will be, and there are circumstances where we won't be, where we will need to be meek and timid, because for whatever reason, we have been personally attacked or what have you. You know, we can't do this alone, I guess is what I'm getting at. We need all of you who are here to come to the floor, to go. You know, you are my brothers, you are my sisters, no matter what. Yeah, sorry, and siblings, sorry.
I'm just pulling away.
I mean, look, fair call. But yeah, look, at the end of the day, we're all human beings. We all bleed red. You know, why should some of us be subjected to hate while others sit idly by and do nothing? That's my 2 cents worth on it, I guess. So look, we are fast running out of time, so I will get to my final point that I just want to ask before we open the floor to questions. So I'll give you notice, start thinking of some amazing questions for these 2 people, because they're absolutely incredible. So get your thinking caps on, and in 1 question's time you'll be able to fire away whatever you want to ask. Okay, so I guess in closing for both of you, why do you think that panels like these are so important? Short question. For once. I won't give you a triple barrel one.
Yeah, I'm waiting for more questions that you can forget.
Sorry.
I think, like we've just been discussing, it's you know, our allies coming out to support us and to learn more and to be more knowledgeable in the area. I do want to go back to what I was just saying about being a good ally. I would not want to put anyone off about supporting them and having that fear of being too overwhelming. That isn't what I was trying to go with. I was thinking about it as I was sitting there. But yes, coming to events like this is showing your support. You know, you are adding more knowledge into your arsenal where you can take that out into the world and you can share it with society, which takes us out of that position of having to do it, which we always are doing. And
Charging for this?
yes. And it's also really stressing as well. And you know, in a room full of, obviously we can sit here and feel confident because we're amongst allies. But to be in other areas and to put yourself on such a platform is not as safe, you know. Not once in my life have I experienced, you know, being scared to walk through a car park. You know, this is all new to me. I am now living in a world where I have to be more, precautious in things that I do. So in saying that, having you as our allies out there supporting, advocating, spreading the word, spreading the news, creating visibility, it takes the pressure off us, which is a lot of pressure. And then we don't become the angry trans people as well. I know. I'm either like the angry black woman or the angry trans woman. But I'm actually both. So yeah, we're not out there fighting this fight alone. You know, our voices aren't getting tired from doing it all. So on that note, I do want to thank all of the allies who have come out tonight and are willing to, you know, listen to me, Johnny and Maddie's experiences and listen to us ramble on. So thank you.
You have a lot more patience than what I would. No.
Yes, that is so important.
Patience.
Yes, it is important to be patient, and I think that is important to touch on. We are very patient people. We have to be, because nobody grows up with Judith Butler's Gender Trouble being their bedtime story, which is such a shame because it's a brilliant piece of work. It's a bit far out, but I was not aware of gender diversity as a child. I was not even aware of gender. I was just aware that I was me and they were them, and we were people. Nobody is born with hatred towards others. We learn this through cultural conditioning. Nobody is born evil. We know that, right? So what you're surrounded by becomes your reality. If you are surrounded by people who are demeaning your existence, who are questioning you constantly, that becomes your reality. You feel demeaned, you feel questioned, you feel small, you feel alone. We need to change the conversation. We need to start recognizing, firstly, the humanity of others. Secondly, that this could be your child. I do not care what your doctor says you are going to have. You are going to have a baby. And that baby may be gender diverse. And that baby may thank you for not pressing gender roles onto them from the minute they are born. And I am lucky that my parents just let me be who I was. You know, of course they used she and her pronouns towards me, and I was awarded a feminine name at birth. But they never treated me any differently for that. I'm very lucky for that. I do not often get a chance to talk about some of the more intimate and frustrating parts of my life. Panels like these allow marginalised people to have a voice. That is imperative, right? That is how we make change, that is how we are heard. We know this from every marginalised community in society. Let me remind you that I am in my 20s. When my parents were young adults, the stolen generation was still happening, very much so. Segregation was happening, very much so. Some church organisations were rejecting people of colour and people of culturally diverse backgrounds. And we look back at that now and we go, that is absolutely shameful. But what about this? What about us? What are we going to say 30 years from now? Look at that Prime Minister bullying that child for being themselves. How shameful. Right now, we are debating whether that child has the right to exist. These panels educate people on things they have not been awarded. I feel sorry that people have not learned about gender diversity, but here is your opportunity to learn about gender diversity. You may even be gender diverse yourself and not realise it, and that's okay. You may come out and you may go, whoops, I don't think I actually am that. And you may find out who you are again, and there's nothing wrong with that either. This is all about being authentic to yourself, being authentic to other people, and allowing people to tell their narrative as they understand themselves.
How great it is too. So I guess, any questions from the floor? Yes.
Hi Madison, so this is just for a question for the whole panel. My name's Alicia, I'm actually a student at QUT, and I actually run an online women's space. What can I do to make sure that it's accommodating for gender diverse or transgender women?
I think, depending, on the context of your platform, highlighting transgender women, putting them in the forefront and, recognising, achievements of trans women who are around, which I know there are at QUT as well. Putting it out there, like we have been discussing, in a lot of cases we are dehumanised. So, when we have that opportunity to be lifted up and showcased that, we are normal people, and if not sometimes better.
Totally.
Yeah, exactly. And highlighting that, we are this is what I say the most, is that I am a person just like you.
Yep.
Which is, the basis of it all really, is that take away the trans, I'm still a woman, So making sure that they're included in, your online publications, or even for other people in marketing materials, or, conversations that you're having, making sure that we're being included really, because at the end of the day, we are here and we should be included as well. So I really hope that helps.
Yeah, I probably second your thoughts there. Trans women are women. It may be best even to put something explicitly in your bio or whatever it is in your online space that says, trans women and non-binary identifying people are welcome here. This is a safe space for you. Don't be afraid to call out nonsense from people that say otherwise. Trans women are constantly portrayed as being a threat. We're constantly told we're not allowed to use women's bathrooms, women's change rooms because we're rapists. None of that is true in any way, shape or form. Yet that's what permeates through society. That's the stigma that is attached with being trans, regardless of your colour in society, is that all of a sudden we are portrayed as being people that are to be feared. What you should be doing instead is showing trans people as normal human beings, as Taraki said, showing their achievements. We all have flaws at the end of the day. Everyone does. But that doesn't, we're only human. That's not exclusive to being trans. So accept trans women as women. It's basically as simple as that. I don't know. Johnny, did you want to touch on anything there?
So those are important points. I'm not a transgender woman, but I do know what it is like to be treated like a woman. Because for part of my life, I was treated like a woman. And so, as a transgender man, a transgender queer person, still working out the terms, it's a bit hard in English. Other languages have words. I like the term queer because it covers everything. That said, I understand more than most people who are not women what it is like to be treated like a woman. We need to realise that misogyny affects more than just cisgender women. We need to understand that there is a reason that homosexual men who are effeminate are the ones being attacked as opposed to the big, grizzly, hairy gay men, right? The bears, yes, right? Nobody's going to mess around with them because they're big, they're muscular, right? Nobody's messing with them. Everybody is messing with the feminine men. People are mocked for being feminine. Being feminine is seen as something to be ashamed of, is seen as less than. And for a long time, I dressed like I was fresh out of a Lowe's catalogue because I was afraid of being seen as a woman, not only because of the issues that come with being seen as a woman in society, but for fear that somebody would go, oh, you're transgender, I don't like that, a transphobic person, right? So I have, and actually I do experience misogyny. If I'm in drag, or if I'm wearing nice, colourful things that make me look like a woman, I can bet your bottom dollar I get creepy stares, I get harassed, I get threats of violence. I know what it is like. And we recently had something called Reclaim the Night, yes, where an incident had occurred in which people who call themselves radical feminists, who are not in fact feminists, because they do not represent or protect all women.
TERFs.
TERFs, thank you. Let's say the word, it's not a slur. TERFs, or feminism appropriating reactionary trans folks, are people who tell themselves and tell other people farts. Haha, how funny is that? Yes. Now, these people say that they are feminists. They do not support women of all creeds. They do not tackle misogyny of all kinds.
They don't even work for straight
They
cisgendered women.
They do not. The only thing they talk about is delegitimizing transgender people.
But that has knock-on effects.
It
If
does.
you're, per se, butch.
You know more about this.
Sorry. If you are per se, like someone that identifies as somewhat of a more masculine woman, they perceive you to be a threat. They perceive you to be unworthy of using their bathrooms. Studies and actual real-life cases have shown, assaults happening against cisgendered women using the bathroom from these other women who go, you're not a woman. But actually, they were born a woman, they identify as a woman, they just choose to dress a little differently. They choose to identify a little differently, but they're still a woman no less. Their problem with trans people has knock-on effects. It excludes everybody that isn't an effeminate woman in their eyes. So if you're slightly different to the norm, that's still not good in their eyes. And so, yeah, Johnny was saying that there was an event recently, there was a rally here in Brisbane. You've been tagged in a few photos. Called Reclaim the Night. It was about a month ago now. And their Facebook page for the event started off being very trans inclusive, which was amazing. But then it got hijacked. It got hijacked by a bunch of online trolls saying, I don't feel safe there because you're being trans inclusive. And I'm going, myself and a number of other trans women that I know, were all going, excuse me, how, why, you know, we're marginalised as much by society as you are, if not more so in some way, shape or form. You know, we experience violence from men just as much as you do. We have a right to protest for our safety just as much as you do. And yet there are still constantly people out there on the internet that seek to demonise trans people. I've seen it constantly in my newsfeed on Facebook, my timeline on Twitter, and scarily enough, it's incredibly prevalent in my hometown of Wellington in New Zealand. You know, Wellington is it's San Francisco of the Southern Hemisphere. It's incredibly queer. And yet, you know, there are all these events that are being run by TERFs to try and stamp out the rights of trans women. The New Zealand government was about to pass a piece of legislation that would allow trans people to go through the birth certificate amendment process without requiring family court approval or surgery, but that was killed by the TERFs. So yeah, that's basically the biggest problem that I think we face in online spaces is the fact that these people are incredibly vocal does have a knock-on effect. They may be small in number, but they're very vocal. Yeah. Any other questions? Sorry, I took that off on a completely wild tangent. Yes.
Hi. Speaking for other men, hi. My
Okay, Johnny, chill.
I just had a question. First of all, you've all spoken fantastically. It's been amazing. My question was when confronting people who are ignoring people who are hostile, but confronting people who are ignorant or might not understand or are really struggling with, you know, how you're presenting, whatever. How do you confront that in a compassionate way that can maybe educate or help educate them? Obviously, not include people who are hostile. Yeah, how do you compassionately confront that?
I think the way I would do it is, you know, so is this person open-minded? Do they want to know?
Just as a general question.
As a general question,
yeah.
I would say, you know, talk to people, talk to trans people, find out their life stories, understand the challenges that we've gone through. For me personally, I know this differs from, say, Johnny's perspective, but for me personally, education as opposed to activism, drawing a distinction between the two works better in my mind. I prefer to sit someone down. I prefer to talk to people at, you know, conferences. Recently, I was talking to a bunch of pharmacists about transgender healthcare, and the responses that I got from that, because pharmacists are so vital in the healthcare chain for trans people, hearing their experiences of interacting with trans people in the medical system and being able to explain to them what it's like from a trans person's perspective as opposed to a black and white medical textbook perspective, I found was better than trying to get things through by blunt force, by yelling at people. That works, but there's a time and a place for it.
I think it's all on context, really.
Yeah.
I think you have to read every situation and every person. At the end of the day, your safety and the safety of others is the most important. So assessing the situation and you know, figuring out whether it is safe for you to say something or not just for you, but other people around you. Because you know, if you're right next to you, like, you know, your trans friend, you obviously don't want to get in that debate. So I think assessing the situation first, and I also think it is a matter of reading the situation and the person. Obviously, if this is someone that you know quite well, you can have more honest conversations. There's a few different ways to call out, you know, negative behaviour. I tend to use humour. I try to be humorous. It works. So you can use humour and play it off. Like Maddie said, education. You can go in with hard facts, stats, that works really well for our professors at the university. Life stories as well. So making them feel emotionally connected to it. You know, if this was your daughter, if this was your mother, if this was your brother, son, anything like that. So having that emotional connection to it as well. I think it's a really great question. I think for everyone here who are allies, I really recommend that you maybe go home and do some research on how to safely call out negative behaviour, because there are, you know, there's various ways that you can do it, and I guess it's a matter of what you feel comfortable with, really. Do you feel comfortable going in with heated debates? Are you more of a humour person? So there are different ways that you can call out negative behaviour, and also sometimes it's not about calling it out. Sometimes it's about reporting it or telling someone else and delegating that responsibility to someone else.
You may not have the mental capacity, like with everything that's going on in your life, to deal with that at that stage.
Exactly, and I think that happens a lot with trans people as well. You know, we don't have enough spoons to fight all of these battles. So, you know, as wrong and disempowering as it is sometimes, well, for me, I do have to let things go because I don't have the energy, uniqueness, charisma, network talent. Sorry, I had to go into that debate, you know. Yeah, so I think it's about assessing the situation, what you're comfortable with, the safety measures, all that kind of stuff. Definitely look into it, guys, because there's heaps of really great resources out there for how to call out negative behaviour.
I would say the same as Taraki and Madison. I also want you to think about the person who was impacted by the statement or behaviour that was displayed. I am lucky enough to work in an environment where my selfhood is valued, where my identity is understood on a respect level, where my name and my pronouns are used without question, where my colleagues come and see me speak. Thank you. And where I don't have to deal with them. And that is not the reality of most people. I feel I'm very lucky in that way. If it were to happen in front of you, or you heard about it, I want you to go to the person in your workplace, or in your place of learning, or in your place of worship, or wherever you are, and I want you to say, are you okay? I want you to check in with that person, because chances are that is not the only thing they've heard today. That is not the only thing they've seen today. That is not the only thing they have felt today about their own identity and their place in the world. So if you reach out, even if you don't understand all the language and what it means, being kind to somebody who's experienced unkindness is so powerful. That's what I would say.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yeah, Nicolette?
Hello. Well done on a fantastic panel. I just wanted to ask, so as a lesbian woman, I've been, had lots of comments about, oh, welcome Nikki as a lesbian, or is it really lesbian sex, or is it really sex if it's two women and there's no penis involved? So from a transgender perspective, for funsies, what kind of comments do you get from people that are maybe slightly offensive that you can kind of look back and laugh?
Are we talking dating, or are we talking everything? Because I'm sure we all have stories with this one.
Growing up profiling?
We went there.
Yeah, what kind of content, really, like, what kind of video?
Let's take it to the nth degree.
Can I
Is everyone
add to
comfortable
that
with
question for more context? Like, I'm John, gay male, white cis male, but to sort of follow along from that, it's like, I guess more pointedly, like in complex situations where people haven't understood the position that you're in and haven't understood your experiences, and obviously everyone's limits on what they're happy to talk about is different, but what's been the threshold for some of you as to like what the level is of where it's become just too uncomfortable, I guess, to talk about, particularly in Johnny's case, which is probably would confuse more people.
Johnny has some
Sorry, Johnny.
interesting stories
Is that,
that I've heard. But I guess for me personally, I think probably the most common one that a lot of trans women get is, I'm just a man in a dress. You know, or have you had the op yet? You know, have you had surgery? Like, trans women are probably, I don't know, I don't know if you'll correct me on this, like, trans women are subject to so many sexually invasive questions. What's in our pants, particularly, is probably the one that we get 99% of the time, even if it's not in a sexual context, just out of sheer curiosity by people. And, you know, I'm okay with people being curious about it, that's fine. Like, it's an understandable thing to be curious about. But unless you're going to sleep with me, you probably don't really need to know what's down there. That's my business, and I don't appreciate the first question that I get asked when I meet someone is, what's down there? What do you have down there? Is generally my response back to them. They go bright red. Because it's not a question that you get asked, you know. I don't go up to people, hi, I'm Maddie, what's in your pants? It's just such an illogical question to ever ask someone, yet somehow it's acceptable to ask a trans person that. That's probably my 2 cents worth. But
following on from that, yes, that is a very common question as well. Actually, I went to a new doctor just on Monday, and she was asking me, like, are you going to get the surgery? And, like, how do you feel about it? I'm like, love, I just want me drugs. Like, I'm not here for, like, Q&A. Like, this is not the time and place. And so, yes, and like I mentioned earlier, I do have passing privilege, and I acknowledge that. And so when people do find out, it's usually a shock, and it's, wow, so have you had the surgery? And it's usually, no, I'm broke. And then I usually will follow, will you pay for it? But it is about that. It's usually about the surgery, and then it's, you know, do you want to get the surgery? And, you know, like, it's like, I'm very much an open book. I could sit here and tell you way too much.
I think all three of us, but
yeah.
like, it's a bad combination to have on a panel.
Exactly. But, you know, that is not something, like, I don't mind sharing it, but I know that other people have an issue sharing it. But when it becomes very, like, it's not just out of people caring, it's just like out of curiosity, and like, I think, to be honest, I think it's the whole process of turning a penis into a vagina. People are like, oh, what?
I have girlfriends that just, like, you can do that.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, you know, that curiosity kind of comes into it as well with all of the snoopy questions. But that's definitely something that I get a lot is, you know, all about the surgeries and stuff. And to be honest, sometimes I would like to just be asked, like, you know, how has your transition been? You know, have you been supported? Like, you know, like I was saying earlier, those fundamental connecting questions, like those things that are connecting me to you on a personal, safe level. And it's not just on, you know, what my body looks like, what your body looks like, what they could look like together, maybe if we're both single, and, you know. I told you too much. So yeah, I'm very much going back to, like, building those fundamental relationships and treating people just as people rather than as science experiments or medical experiments. So yes, that is the question that I get asked the most.
I want to say that because Taraki and Madison are women, that is why they get more sexual questions.
Yeah.
It is.
Because
that-
they're beautiful.
Oh, of course. I mean, well, if it's a wanted advance, then lovely. If it's unwanted, if it's uncomfortable, that's not great, you know? There's a way to handle that too, of course. I have a very different experience in this realm, and the realm I'm talking about is the gay scene. Dealing with gay men is an interesting one. I have had every experience from beautiful, loving, affirmative, open-minded gay men to ones that scream and run away, a la stereotype. I have an entire folder on my phone called Things That Have Been Said to Me on Grindr. And I share them with other trans people for a laugh. Yes.
Can I get on that group?
Yes, please. Oh, sorry, what?
I want to be a part of that group.
You want to be a part of that group? Oh, I thought you said, can I add on to that? No. Yes, I'll send you some, you send me some, we'll have a laugh about it. You know, there is nothing wrong with being curious, but I think that should not befall us to describe these things to you. I feel that there is always a conflation with sexuality and gender. So I'm homosexual, I like men, I like masculine people like me, I like fruity people like me. Homo meaning same, I like sameness, that's what I like. And I go through the gay scene and I get all sorts of, I go through bisexual men as well, and they can say things like, oh, best of both worlds. And I go, I'm not Hannah Montana. What do you mean? Best of both, oh, and you know what? Often that comment is well intentioned. What they're saying to me is, I love the masculine and the feminine parts of you, and that makes me feel good about being bisexual. And that's okay. Just maybe don't say it like that. And if you're not sure what to call someone's body parts, if you've learned that somebody that you want to sleep with is trans, or they're intersex and they have different body parts that you might not expect to have, you should say something like, what would you like me to refer to that as? You know, let people tell their narratives, let people label their body in the way that they want to. Say, is it okay to touch here? Is there anything I should know before we go home and Netflix for about 5 minutes? You know, to put it in PG terms. So, it's important to be poetic and be kind in your language, to let people tell their own narrative. And also to have a laugh with us because, some of the things that have been said to me, I don't even want to repeat them. I don't think it's appropriate.
I mean, if you could keep it PG, that'd be
I will
great.
keep it PG.
Later, though.
Yeah, depends on which ones, but you know.
Actually, not those ones.
No, it's fine. But yeah, just realise that we are going through lots of spotlighting and having lots of strange things said to us. We have lots of strange, uncomfortable feelings as well. Not all of us, but most of us. And our patience gets worn thin pretty quickly. But, you know, I've always said to people in my work environment, if you have questions, I would rather my identity be subject to a conversation rather than a Google search. Because the things you find on Google, I've got a bit of a cough, oh, I'm going to die from a brain hemorrhage. No. Oh, trans people are aliens, oh my goodness. No, that's the Alan Jones podcast. No, Alex Jones, sorry. Probably say the same sorts of things, yeah. So, probably both, but yeah. Call for gay men. Hello, we got some gay men in the room who are openly gay. If you're having a kiki at brunch, and oh my god, I got a trans man the other day. They don't usually say that. Oh my god, ew, like, I don't go near that. Say, what's the problem? Is he not butch enough for you? Are you both bottoms? Is that the problem? You know, like, call it out with a little bit of humour and realise that the transphobia is pervasive in queer spaces. Call that out, support your trans friends.
I just want to jump on that really quickly. Well, bad time. Do that. Read the room. I'm not sure how we're going with time, but I do want to just add to that with your perspective on, you know, the gay scene. I would like our allies and people to know that there is infighting within our diverse communities, of course, where people are gathering. There are going to be differences of opinions. So infighting does happen, and particularly within the gender diverse communities as well, and within other trans people as well, people policing your, transness, whether you are woman enough, whether you are man enough, whether you are not. Just all of that kind of policing. And I think it really takes away the core message that we're trying to get across is it's not about all of that, it's about me as a person. So, it's important for us, LGBTI people in the room as well, is that we are also lifting our other LGBTI communities up. Because, there are marginal groups within our communities, like Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities as well. They are also a group that are marginalised within the LGBTI communities. There are people online, certain dating apps that Johnny is on that rhyme with Grindr.
Is that a promo or a dig?
And there's people out there on their profiles who are saying no blacks. This type of, and just because we are part of a already marginal group doesn't mean that negative and nasty behaviour isn't happening in there as well. So it's also calling it out within our own groups as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One last question. Yes.
Okay, super quick one. Along that line of lateral violence and whatnot, do you still feel that rainbow flag is inclusive if you are non-binary, if you're trans, because of all the shit fighting going on at the moment? If I'm, say, in a conservative workplace and I'm wanting to put up some sort of safe space type of stickers, is the rainbow flag enough, or would you be would it be more appropriate to have trans flags, non-binary flags? Sorry, that was meant to be easy.
No, that is a very easy question, I guess from my perspective, because, alright, we know what the Stonewall riots are, do we? If you don't know, the Stonewall riots happened 50 years ago. It was the beginning of LGBTI civil rights in the Western world. And this was led by two transgender women of colour. We started this, and we will not be silenced. And so I think when we're thinking about the rainbow flag, a rainbow is a spectrum. It's spectral. It isn't little letters. It isn't an alphabet soup. It encompasses people who are of a marginalised gender identity and or sexual orientation. If you are queer or rainbow or whatever words you like to use, you are part of that. The reason why we have different flags like the transgender flag, the non-binary flag, the intersex flag, among others, is that we want to highlight particular sections of those communities who have been silenced even within the rainbow community. And so just because an organisation or a space is rainbow affirming does not mean they will necessarily be transgender, intersex and or non-binary affirming. And so when you put up stickers or flags that are representative or symbols or whatever kind of visual cue you want to give that yes, we are safe and we are here for you, when you want to do that, I would say absolutely go for it, because there are even people within our own community that consider us not to be part of that. We've seen an increase in organisations splintering off. For example, Stonewall UK, an organisation that's similar to Equality Australia here in Britain, a group called LGB Alliance. They have removed transgender, intersex and gender diverse people from their organisation. And I know somebody who used to work at Stonewall, and they are not for that. And that's the reason they had to break off and make themselves a hate group, and that is what they are. And I think if you don't have the T, or the I, or the Q, what are you doing? You're just throwing... Have I got a what?
Have you got a rainbow?
I've got a rainbow.
Like, if you don't have those letters, like...
Exactly. Have you got a rainbow if it's not all inclusive? What are you fighting for if you are not addressing all people who are marginalised on the basis of their gender identity and or sexual orientation? You're absolutely welcome to use transgender, non-binary, intersex flags because that speaks to particular communities who have not been seen previously.
I think that was great.
That was pretty much it, really.
Can we just knock it out of the park? I mean, look, I think it depends on the workplace. You know, if it's not acceptable to have those flags up and the rain, like, I mean, me personally, I associate with the trans flag, but on the same, token, I also associate with the rainbow flag. So seeing either of those two flags there is an indicator, at least to me, that that's a safe space. If I then go into that space and it's not a safe space, then I will remove myself and I won't go back. But it's an initial welcoming, at the very least. It's a sign of we're trying to be inclusive here. We recognise LGBTIQ people in this space. Obviously, individual politics does occur within the community, as Johnny was just saying. You know, I too see that splinter group happening. But I think let's not let the haters get in the way of what that flag actually does stand for. And you know, kind of comes back to when you do see that hatred, call it out for what it is. And if needed, kick it out. You know. It's pretty simple and hard. There is no place for hate in society. End of, be that hate towards someone's colour, hate towards someone's race, hate towards someone's religion, hate towards someone's identity. We are all human beings and we are all equally deserving of love and respect. It's that simple. Thank you all so much for coming. I think I can speak for all of us here and say that we've had an absolute blast talking to you guys tonight. You know, if you do have any other questions for us, please, by all means, come up to us afterwards, have a chat with us. But yeah, I think that wraps up formal proceedings for the night.
Sorry, continue.
No.
We just had a token of our appreciation, so thank you so much for coming along and sharing your story. It really meant a lot to us to hear from you. So thank you, and thank you to Patty too for being chair and panel.
And organising. I'm like, this is the first event that I've actually ever organised. So I was slightly catching up down there. I don't know how this is going to go. So thank you all for coming. Thank you all so much for being so supportive of us. And we look forward to, on behalf of Out for Australia, we look forward to seeing you all at the next event, which is our Christmas party.
Christmas party!
I hear murmurings. Ask me later.